Teina Pora was a teenager when he was first sent to Paremoremo prison for the rape and murder of Susan Burdett. He hadn't committed it. Today, more than 2 decades later, he feels happy and free for the first time. A long, difficult campaign for his freedom, for his innocence to be acknowledged, and for compensation to be paid ended with him being awarded an additional $988,000 compensation to take into account inflation over the 22 years he was in prison. We begin tonight with this report from our Justice reporter, Edward Gay.
Teina Pora was found guilty twice at the High Court in Auckland, so it was fitting that today his longtime supporter Tim McKinnell and lawyer Jonathan Krebs stood outside the court where the wrongful convictions were handed down more than 20 years ago. Mr McKinnell says the case is over now, there's nothing more to fight for.
In Teina's words, he wants to thank the Andrew guy that's fixing it all. So he's absolutely thrilled. He said to me this morning that he, for the first time, feels happy and free. So those are his words verbatim.
The additional money brings the total compensation package to just over $3.5 million and will be paid into a trust account to benefit Teina Pora and his whanau.
When we first began to analyse the compensation payments made to others, we thought the range of $6 to $8 million would have been consistent with what others had been paid. Having said that, Teina is more than happy. It is a lot of money, it's more than he will ever need, and he's very grateful.
Mr Krebs took the opportunity today to advocate for the creation of a criminal case review commission that would sit outside the courts and see cases independently investigated.
There are times when things go wrong. Mr Pora's case was a case that was wrong from the outset, and at no stage has anybody in any official position till this week stepped back and said something's gone wrong there, we should all look together at the corpse of this case and work out what's happened. And that's been a problem, and it's been resistance we've found day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, until now.
A 2006 report by the retired High Court judge Sir Thomas Thorpe estimated there could be 20 people in New Zealand prisons serving sentences for crimes they never committed. Mr McKinnell said when they started working on Mr Pora's case, they naively believed the authorities would cooperate, realising a wrong needed to be put right.
That's not what's happened. What appears to have been the culture and the approach is to resist everything and make us prove it, and knowing full well that we weren't properly resourced. And so I have real issues with a justice system that sees justice as secondary to preserving what is already in place. And so I have a great deal of hope for the Criminal Case Review Commission. It will have resourcing, it will have funding, and it will be able to deal with those types of issues and not have to fight to get its hands on evidence that will help prove somebody's innocence.
Mr McKinnell also reminded the media that the murder of Susan Burdett remained unsolved. The serial rapist Malcolm Rewa is serving a prison sentence with a minimum non-parole period of 22 years for 24 rapes, including that of Susan Burdett, but no one has been held accountable for her murder. Rewa's DNA was found at the scene, but while he was convicted of her rape, 2 juries could not decide if he was guilty of Miss Burdett's murder. RNZ asked the police for an update on the Burdett murder investigation, but the police did not respond before deadline. Back at the High Court today, Mr Krebs praised Mr McKinnell, a former police officer turned private investigator, who took up Mr Pora's case 8 years ago and has fought for justice ever since.
Without Tim's insight back in 2009, his dogged pushing to get into the case from the start, Mr Pora is most likely still to be in custody. Tim is the hero, the singular hero of this case.
The increased compensation fulfills a promise that the new government made while in opposition. But Andrew Little says while justice has now been done in Teina Pora's case, he's unlikely to be the only victim of a miscarriage of justice, and changes needed to be made, including creating a Criminal Cases Review Commission. The Justice Minister says the current system of going through the appeal courts before applying to the Governor-General for mercy was murky.
Getting justice should not rely on well-meaning, well-motivated people like Tim McKinnell to be the crusader to get you justice, because justice might now have been done for Teina Pora, but there will be others who are in prison at the moment who don't have a champion, but who are entitled to have a system to put right the things that the criminal justice system does wrong.
Andrew Little says work on an independent criminal cases commission is already underway. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Edward Gay ahau.
And I will talk to Tim McKinnell and Jonathan Krebs later in the program.